What's up, YouTube? Welcome to your first graphic design tutorial powered by Studio 2308. This tutorial we're going to cover making a basic, good-looking, high-gloss web button. What you're going to need for this tutorial is the latest version of Gimp. I think the version of Gimp I'm using is 2.80. You can find that at gimp.org. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is make a new document. We'll do this by hitting File, New. The default image size should be more than adequate for what we're doing. Hit OK. We're going to turn the background black. Then we're going to right-click the background layer, hit Add Alpha Channel. Then we're going to make a new layer. And on this new layer, we're going to grab our square selection tool. We're going to make sure rounded corners is checked and the radius is on 23. Then we'll make our button. And that looks about like the size of a button. Next thing we're going to do is grab our gradient tool. We're going to change our background color to a dark green, and our foreground color to a very light green. We're going to make sure that our gradient is on FG to BG RGB. We're going to hold Control to get a straight line. Let Gimp blend it. So now we have our basic shape. We're going to call this layer Button Base. And we're going to duplicate this layer. Right-click, Duplicate Layer. And on the bottom layer, we're going to hit Filters, Light and Shadow, Drop Shadow. The defaults on this are absolutely fine for this example. And now you can't see the drop shadow because we have a black background. But if you click the eye next to the background layer, you notice that the drop shadow is there. And since this is a web image, it's going to be in PNG format, which will support transparency, so this checker box will no longer appear. I'll show you that at the end of the tutorial. But for now, to make it easier to work, we're going to turn the background back on. Okay, now we're going to make a new layer, which is our text layer. We're going to use the font Chunk 5. You can find this on YouTube by not YouTube, but Google by typing in Chunk 5 font. We're going to make the size 100. It's 100 px or pixels. We're going to make sure anti-aliasing is checked. And we're going to turn the color of this a dark green, not quite black. I'll explain the reason for that in a moment. And we'll just type button. And then we'll grab our move tool. And we'll move, not that layer. We will move the button layer to the appropriate position, which I would say about there seems good. Now on button, we're going to click, right click that is, hit alpha to selection. We're going to make a new layer. We're going to grab our zoom tool, zoom in. We're going to grab our brush tool, airbrush tool that is. We're going to grab a fuzzy brush, basic fuzzy brush. We're going to turn the opacity to about 80, 83, that's fine. We're going to lightly shade the edges. Oh, make sure you turn your foreground color to black. And we're going to lightly shade the edges. And what this is going to do is it's going to give us a nice sunk in kind of effect on our text. And for the sake of time, I don't think I'll be spending a terrible amount of time on this. When you're doing this tutorial, you can take the time that you think it will require to make it look right or pretty with whatever your button's going to say. Or if you're trying to do this tutorial in Photoshop, it would be very simple to use the inner shadow filter or effect in Photoshop for text. And just go back over your work and make sure there's nothing you think that needs to be darkened or lightened in any way. Just do a little spot check. Make sure that everything is to your liking. Like I said, in this example, I'm not going to try to make it perfect, just for the sake of time. Now we'll grab our zoom tool and click zoom out and drop it down to the original size, and we'll hit select, none. And now we have this, but it's kind of rough, so what we can actually do here is put the layer mode on overlay and then drop the opacity just a little bit, just to get that nice sunken look. Maybe, about 75 looks right. Now, what we're going to do is click button base. We're going to right click, alpha to selection. We're going to make a new layer. And we're going to call this layer top HL for highlight. We're going to grab our gradient tool. We're going to set our foreground color to white. Put our gradient mode on FG to transparent. And we're going to hold control to get our straight line. And go down to about the middle of the text. Stroking from top to bottom. And now you get this nice gloss effect. And we're going to make another new layer. And we're going to make a gradient on the bottom. And this one we're going to turn the opacity down quite a bit. And now we're going to grab our square selection tool, hit new layer, and we're going to try to get the top of this line, but slightly inside of the old selection. Make sure your selection mode is on replace the current selection. And now we're going to click subtract from the current selection. And basically you just start out here and run this across so you get a straight line, since we do have rounded corners on. And we have this selection here. We're going to grab our gradient tool and stroke another gradient right on top of the other one. Now, with this one, we're going to turn the opacity down. Let's say, just barely want it visible. Hit select none. And then we're going to turn off our background layer. And there you have it. Your very first professional looking web button in Gimp. And now to save this, you're going to want to hit File, and not Save As, because that's going to save it as a Gimp file, but Export To. And then we're going to go with PNG, because that supports the transparency. You could also do GIF if you wanted. The settings I have here are pretty good. I would go with the compression level a little bit lower so it doesn't distort quite as bad. Hit export. And then, when we close this, and you can close without saving because we exported it to a different file, we can actually go find our image. And you will see that it shows the background is white because there's not actually a background there. So now your button is just free floating, which is how it will appear on your website unless you have a black background. Or say you have a blue background, you'll still get the drop shadow because there is a transparency around this image. So there you have it. A professional looking web button made in Gimp.